I babysat my little sister, and what she said still terrifies me. It was just my sister and I. As I was preparing her foods, I looked away to the closet for a brief moment, and as soon as I turned around, my little sister told me that someone was behind me and vanishes as soon as I turned around. This gave me goosebumps, and I tried to calm her down and told her it's nothing. When we were upstairs, I told her I was getting something downstairs really quick. When I got back, my sister told me there was an old lady smiling at her but vanishes when I got back. When it was bedtime, as I was sleeping, I feel like I'm hearing footsteps outside the door and downstairs, but the steps are like someone's trying to avoid being caught. My parents don't live in that house anymore. I asked my sister about it again a few months later and she looked terrified, so I don't think I'm going to bring back any terrifying memories to her. Stories number 2. My cute and creepy toddler. I was cooking the other day and my 2-year-old son was in his high chair across the island. He was cheesing so hard towards the back corner of the kitchen. My dad had a heart attack and died in that exact spot nearly 2 years ago. I said, "What are you cheesing about, sir?" to my son, and he said, "Grandfather." Ah ha ha ha. Grandfather. You know, Opa. I got goosebumps. We've never referred to my dad as grandfather. Those were the 2 names he'd hoped my son would call him. We always just said my dad or grandpa when we talk about how much he loved our son. He died when our son was almost 5 months old. He spent so much time with him in the neonatal intensive care unit and visited often when he came home. There is no way he remembers him. Stories number 3. Do I have a mimic? My daughter just turned 13. She started researching why she kept hearing us say her name or come here when we never talked. Soon after I started hearing stuff. Well, my husband and son's voice. I've even heard "Hey mommy, come here." I stopped what I was doing and stood there. My son was at his dad's house. Recently I was cleaning out my walk-in closet and my husband came in and said, "How'd you get in here so fast and without me seeing you?" I asked what he meant, as I've been there for a good while. He then replied, "No, I just saw you pass me in the hallway to walk towards the kitchen." The next day I was outside looking for my husband, so I whistled because he wasn't responding. I heard, "Why are you whistling?" I said, "Where are you? Why aren't you answering me?" I then hear his voice say, "I'm back here." I then walk out back to our garden and stopped. The moment I didn't see him, I turned around, went up front, and he was watering plants with his headphones on. I asked him why. He said he was about back when he wasn't there. He said, "I never said anything to you. I didn't even hear you." Something else, my dog looks in areas of the house now and growls when there's nothing there we can see. We're also smelling cigarette smoke some nights. We do not smoke. Stories number 4. Happened to my mom this morning. Debunk this. She got up as usual and my stepdad was still in bed. She got up, left the room and closed the door on the way out. Half an hour later she texts him asking if he's okay and what time he was going into work, to get a text back saying he'd been at work for the past 2 hours. She thought he was joking and went upstairs to look for him, to find her bedroom door open and he wasn't there. She's been freaking out all day because she knows he was in bed when she woke up and we can't explain it. Is this paranormal? Someone please make sense of this. Stories number 5. I can't explain what I saw that day. It's 2005 and I'm at the cinema with a bunch of friends for someone's birthday. It's an old building in a small town in Lancashire. The film finishes and we're about to leave to go for some food, but I ask them to wait whilst I quickly go to the bathroom. I walk in and immediately I'm hit with the strong stench of rotting meat. I then hear a low growling and moaning coming from one of the stalls and I assume someone is unwell. Before I can call out to check on them, I hear a shuffling on the ground and this girl slides out under the gap in the stall door. Her face is a sickly green color, her under eyes are dark and hollow and her hair is bedraggled, sticking to her face. Her eyes are rolling in her skull and she's groaning and growling. It's a frightening sight, and I run out of the bathroom. I'm a teenager at this time, so I panic and tell a member of staff that I think someone is deathly unwell in the bathroom. My friends and I wait whilst 2 staff members go check it out, but they come out about 30 seconds later saying all the stalls are empty, there's nobody in there. There's no way. I'm terrified of what I saw, but I run straight back into the bathroom and confirm what the staff say, it's empty. The smell has completely disappeared and the stall I saw her slide out from is empty with no signs of anything happening. We were waiting in the corridor outside the bathroom the whole time, so there's no way she'd get out without us seeing. I don't know what I saw that day and have no explanation. At the time I knew something wasn't quite right and that it wasn't quite of this world, but I was telling myself that it was just a sick girl, thinking logically about it. If I'd left after telling the staff, then I would have always been able to tell myself that. But sticking around and finding out that she disappeared with no trace really spooked me. Any ideas about what I saw that day? Stories number 6. Both me and my son saw a stick man at the same time. In 2023, me and my wife and son were living in a rental bungalow as we're waiting for our house to be finished from building work. Very nice bungalow in a very nice place, possibly about 70 to 80 years old. My son's bedroom was in a loft conversion, which also had an ensuite bathroom. I'm in his bedroom telling him off about how messy his bedroom is and how he is going to reorganize everything and tidy up, and as I do, I glance towards the bathroom door and see a very tall but stick-like figure dart from the doorway and hide behind the door. It freaked me out. It's possible I was with my son. I very quickly did not show any change of expression as I couldn't quite believe what LD saw and carried on, telling my son off. Then my son looked at me and screamed out, "I've just seen somebody run into the bathroom and hide behind the door." He saw it too. The figure was like a 6-foot-tall stick man. And it moved like a real man but very fast. It was kind of black in color, and if I said it had to resemble something, it would resemble one of those stick man artists use that you see available in all art shops where you can move arms, limbs, and the head. Can anyone tell me what it is that I saw? What does it mean that I saw this thing? Stories number 7. First time seeing a ghost. I have been living in this house for just under a year now. I didn't like it from the word go, but my parents loved it, so here we are. I was fast asleep in bed when I had an overwhelming feeling of not being alone in my room, so I opened my eyes and looked around but couldn't see anything at first. Then suddenly I met eyes something really strange. The only way I can describe it is a man made of glass or carved from ice. Totally transparent, but his features were lit up by the slightest light sources. He was staring right at me, and while I was still trying to work out what the hell I was seeing, he took a step closer towards the foot of my bed and his features were getting more and more visible. I didn't scream because my dad works stupid hours and he had to wake up in about an hour. Oh shock horror, it was 3 a.m., and that was just engraved in my brain to not wake him up. I pulled the covers over my head and tucked my feet under the duvet. I dared to look again and he was even closer. I kid you not, I actually passed out from fear. My heart was going so fast that I lost consciousness. I woke up as normal in the morning and that was that. I told my brother about it and he said he's heard weird things. My dog also gets super aggro in the house sometimes. He's a guard dog and I figured he was just adjusting to the new house and extra weary of everything, but now I know why. So, a week later I'm chatting to my friend on the Xbox about it and we had a laugh and a joke. All of a sudden, my tub chair just tips the F***K over. Those things don't just fall over, it's their whole design. I shat myself and my friend could hear my freaking out on the headset. Anyway, I am not happy. I live in the countryside of Wales, UK, so much history. We could be pitched on a battlefield or a witch-burning site, who knows. I love it here, but I hate my new friend who I refer to as the Glass Man. I now believe in ghosts because no matter who you meet in life they will have a ghost story or know somebody who does. I just hope he hasn't got any evil intentions and that he leaves my shit alone. Stories number 8. What could have happened? A couple of years ago, I had a strange experience while visiting my grandfather. My girlfriend at the time was with me, and after my grandfather went to bed, the two of us settled in the living room, watching YouTube on my phone for a bit before turning in for the night. We planned to leave in the morning. As we were watching the video, out of nowhere, I felt something cold, almost like fingers, run up my leg. I don't scare easily, but this made me panic. I threw the blanket off my legs, accidentally tossing my phone in the process. I quickly turned on the light, but there was nothing unusual in sight. I started looking for my phone, as I'd heard it hit the floor, but it was nowhere to be found. Given the size of the living room, I thought it couldn't have gone far. I checked under the couch and searched the area carefully, but still, there was no sign of it. Confused, I used my grandfather's phone to call mine. It rang twice before someone picked up. I said, "Hello," and a woman's voice replied with, "Hello," in return. The voice sounded exactly like my grandfather's neighbor. Now, I was even more confused. I asked my girlfriend to double-check the number to confirm it was really mine, and she nodded, confirming it was. After hearing the voice, I hung up and called again, but this time, no one picked up. Then, about 5 minutes later, my phone reappeared beside the couch, in the exact spot I'd already searched multiple times. To this day, I still can't explain how someone else answered my phone that night, or where it had disappeared to. Stories number 9. Lady floating around house at night. This happened in 1977. We lived in a small house back then. I was 6 years old and slept in a small bed in my parents' bedroom beside the window. One night I woke up in the middle of the night and sat up in bed. My parents always kept the blinds open and the street lights brightened our room a bit. I looked to my left and could see my parents fast asleep. Then I noticed something in the hallway through the door. My parents also kept the bedroom door open at night. It was a lady in an olden-style gown, floating on what looked like a cloud around her feet. She was tall and all one color, dress, hair and face, like a deep red burgundy color. She entered the bedroom where I was sleeping, stood in front of my parents' bed for a while, then looked at me and floated towards the front of my bed, stared at me for a couple of seconds, then kind of leaned forward on top of me, staring at me. I quickly pulled the blanket over my head and hid under the blanket. That's all I remember. The next morning my mom had to go buy some milk from the corner store, and I remember crying my head off telling her not to go but wouldn't tell her why. I finally told her like 30 years later, and she did say that the man they bought the house from said his wife had died in that house, so who knows. Still stuck in my head after nearly 50 years. Stories number 10. Following deceased father through portal. We took my father off life support about 2 years ago and he passed shortly after. Long story, but I have felt guilt and possible resentment. My sister in particular had events happen where she felt resentment from him for us making the call. Nothing can prepare you for watching a loved one die, but this was brutal. He fought to live but just couldn't get the air. I wanted to give him my own breath. Unfortunately, his organs had shut down and there wasn't much to be done medically. I've had multiple dreams about him. Some horrible where he's just dead-faced and can't communicate or express body language. Some he's chatting and cutting up until I communicate with him in detail he's gone, and then he's mute/dead-faced. The other night I awake to son, my dad was by my bed in my room. In physical form, but my head had the foggy just woke up feeling. He started talking to me, catching up. Expressing how proud of my success and achievements. Saying he wasn't resentful. Saying he had reached out many times through dream. We talked shortly and he started to say it was time he had to go. This not being the first time I've encountered a deceased loved one in dream, I try to get him to stay. What's the worst that happens? You're stuck here. Me. He says there is an order and begins to pull away into a black portal under my antique vanity. I grip his hands and say I'm not letting go. You are staying here or I'm coming with you. He gets pulled into the black portal. I slowly get pulled in as well. As my arms enter, I feel a fleshy wall with what I describe as tendrils like the ridges on a dog's jowls on the walls. I enter and come out onto a dirt floor in what seems like a cave. There is a man at the end with a shocked face. "What are you doing here?" I express I followed my father here and notice I still have his severed hands in mine. The man keeps saying I'm not supposed to be here. I've been a lucid dreamer for years and tell him I've heard this before and describe him as the dream police. To which he laughed. He said no, not dream police, but there is an order to things. I explained I just wanted more time and he started telling me how dangerous it was for me to be here. That the further I get away from the natural order was akin to flying outside the Earth's gravitational pull. If I get too far there is nothing to tether me to my body. He also mentions he can only try to connect me back 3 times. I acknowledge and ask for time. I spend a while trying to locate my father. I interrogate folks I see that would entertain it. One guy I talked to didn't know my dad, but I asked him about what the water looked like here. My wife had recently talked to me about a medium who said the dead realm water behaves differently. We are still in a cave. I saw no water, but his response was the waters overhead are terrifying. Describing monsters, giant fish, red waters, and shadows. I never found my father down there. I returned to end of the tunnel I had come from and tried to return home. The tunnel/portal guide hands me a phone, an old standard landline phone. Tells me to call a person close to me I'm connected to. I immediately think my little sister, though I don't know her number. He says don't worry about her number, just concentrate on her. She answers the phone. I say it's me, your brother, trying to get home, describing everything as briefly as possible. She says slowly, Joseph, it's 2040. She explains how old my nieces are and their lives, etc. I can't say she thought I was dead, but she acted like I'd been gone for so long. The dream continues, but I find it hard to remember more than foggy little details. The reason I post here instead of dream or lucid is because I've experienced similar to this prior. Recently deceased pets ext. A vivid lucid dreamer. I at least feel a big difference between seeing loved ones versus them being there artificially. I've had many lucid experiences where I reach beyond where I'm being told I'm not supposed to be. To me this was my father reaching to me from beyond. I'm not sure me taking action to go with him was the right one, but believe I took a glimpse into his new world. I hope it wasn't purgatory. I don't think so, as he was still able to reach out. I could write exhaustingly on this and realize how crazy it sounds, but this was as real as it gets for me, and I was very reserved about posting this. Stories number 11. An orb of light exploded in my living room a year ago, causing me to feel energy fields ever since. I had a supernatural experience a year ago that permanently activated the ability for me to feel energy fields. Can anyone elaborate on what might have happened and be still going on? My story is long but as detailed as I could make it. It started the afternoon after I got back from a 2-week trip to the Middle East, Izarl, Jordan, Turkey. I was sitting in our living room in the early afternoon drinking some tea and reading on my phone when I noticed my index finger, middle finger and thumb on my right hand started feeling like they were tingling and increasing in intensity. It felt totally unusual, but how I could best describe it was like it was being charged up. I didn't think much of it other than it was odd, but it was distracting, so I kept looking over at my hand. My wife noticed me looking at it and said, "What's wrong with your hand?" "I don't know, it just feels weird and is tingling," I said. "Let me see," she said as she walked over to where I was sitting down, reached out to touch it, and before she could even reach her hand to mine, we both felt an explosive pulsing orb of energy flash between us without even yet making contact with each other. It looked to me like a white sphere expanding outwards and exploding between us. Her hand was probably 12 to 18 inches away from even touching me when this happened. She jumped back and out loud we both yelled out, "Whoa, what the fuck was that?" My immediate reaction was to try it again. I stood up and walked over to her where I felt instinctually drawn to hovering my fingers over the top of her chest and back several inches above it as though I was scanning across her like a metal detector. It felt as though there were strings of light connecting my fingers to her. For part of this experience, I could actually visualize them and see them, though it felt more like a type of augmented reality, as I knew they weren't literally visible in the room. I could just see them. Extending out of my fingers, it was like tentacles of spaghetti light reaching out to her body towards points of contact that felt like areas of increased energy. There the field of the area felt denser, with almost a magnetic resistance type of feeling, while some areas would have almost none. In the clear areas my fingers still tingled a little but would feel like the area was either clear of energy, weight, or had diminished magnetic resistance until I'd get closer to a denser area where the field would increase until I could almost find the densest energetic point within the area. The dense areas felt like energy continents where the closer I moved my finger to their relative center, the stronger the pull between the tip of my finger and the cord of energy reaching out towards it was. It was almost like my finger was being tugged towards the fields where the magnetic connection was the strongest, and once I felt the edges of one of these denser spaces, I could move my finger around the area to feel where the energy was the densest and determine where the borders of these energy continents were. My fingers very much felt like an antenna of sorts, both broadcasting to her but receiving at the same time. It was kind of like scanning through static on a radio station, hitting an audible frequency that gets clearer until you tune the station in perfectly when the audio is most clear. If I moved past where it was most in tune, I could immediately feel it. I literally could feel and hear my wife's heartbeat from about 2 to 3 feet or more away as electrical pulses. When I moved anywhere outside that narrow field of space, it would get quiet until I was far enough away that it would be gone. Think of the area as being 6 to 12 inches or so in diameter roughly. I could hear her heart pulsing in my head in addition to feeling it in my finger. It also sounded a little like I could feel a hum in between beats, so it would kind of sound like a lightsaber swinging when passing over her heart, then idling between swings when I pointed my fingers away. I tried to see if I could feel the energy with my other hand by pulling on where I perceived the cord of light to be, but could not feel it with my left hand even, though I could visualize it still via the scanning of my right hand I was doing. I still tried to pull on the energy with my left hand, though knowing that maybe it was still doing something, as even if I couldn't feel the field with my left hand, I could still visualize it. This went on for about 10 to 15 minutes, with both of us kind remarking and kind of freaking out while I'm doing it. What is this? What's going on? How is this possible? Etc. comprised most of what was said while I was scanning her. Other than that, we were mostly speechless, just taking the experience in. My wife could feel me doing all of this the entire time and made me stop after the 10 to 15 minutes as she felt exhausted by it. She said it feels uncomfortable and she feels a little bit violated when I do it. Not the greatest first review of my energy abilities. LOL. After stopping, it slowly fizzled out, though I could feel residuals of the sensation for both the rest of the day and in intermittent spurts afterwards. Afterwards we went on about our day, not even talking about it till late that evening. It's weird when I think about it because it was the craziest thing we've both ever experienced, but somehow, we were both at a loss for words. It was like stepping into some parallel reality that was too much for us to process at that moment. However, later that night I awoke and couldn't get back to sleep. I found myself again with an irresistible urge to get up and write the experience down while it was fresh. I tried to talk myself out of it, thinking I'd still remember it in the morning, but my mind kept saying, no, write it down now. It was around 3 a.m. As soon as I finished writing the experience down, our master bedroom bathroom lights slowly pulsed on to full blast brightness, then abruptly turned back off. I looked at the clock and it was 3:33 a.m. If the story couldn't get any weirder. Anyway, about 7 to 10 days went by where I thought about it daily. I didn't even consider trying it again as I sort of just expected it was some freak spontaneous moment. However, I couldn't get it off my mind and eventually decided to share the story with a family member who has Reiki experience, thinking maybe she was have some useful information. She was the first one to suggest I should try it again, and told me to go to experiment with one of my wife's many crystals, who owns an online crystal boutique. My aunt said that quartz is very powerful in Reiki sessions, so later that evening I found the biggest piece of quartz I could find on our shelves. Walked over to it, reached out my hand, and immediately, once my hand was about 6 to 12 inches away, I could feel this energy field again. It freaked me out a little. I pulled my hand back like I had just touched a hot burner or something. I repeated this again for about another 5 minutes until my entire arm felt like it was pulsing with this energy all the way up to my shoulder. In the few weeks that followed, I found that this tingling would activate at random. I could feel it coming on, and once it was stimulated, I could feel the field of objects. However, after several months now of experimenting and working with it on my own, I've developed it to where I can activate it almost instantly at will. No other time has been as intense with sound and visuals as that initial Big Bang moment, but whatever got activated in me has most definitely stayed on. It's like stepping into a weird dream. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up any day and the ability will be gone, but it hasn't. Quite the contrary. For the initial months after, I was obsessed with trying to feel the field of everything. Now, if anything, it has become so normal to me, like an extra sense. When I want to do it now, I simply just have to think for a few seconds about connecting with the object and agree in my head to connect, and within a few seconds, I sort of tune in and lock onto it. It doesn't come on spontaneously as much anymore now that I can turn it on, but every now and again it will. I've been doing various experiments testing different objects, usually crystals because they are usually more intense, but I've tried everyday objects too, with most having some sort of feeling to their field. My pets definitely feel like I can feel injuries, organs, or areas of inflammation in particular, as well as my wife and several others who I've shared the story with. All of them felt something, with most describing it like a low-level electrical current, sometimes with a magnetic feeling to it. Like a 9-volt battery on your tongue, but sometimes with a magnetic force to it too. My wife calls it sparkly fingers now. I told my very skeptical sister about this for weeks before she let me try it on her hand, and within a couple of minutes she freaked out when I zapped her and immediately said to me, "Who are you?" If things couldn't get more unusual, unrelated to the investigation of this, I was at a local cemetery one time since, and immediately it spontaneously activated when I got on the property. It caught me off guard. I wasn't even thinking about it or anticipating it not being there for that purpose. However, for the next hour I was there. I could feel the energy signature of every single grave I scanned over. Each one a unique intensity, just like the unique signatures of crystals. That was the first time I realized I can use this sense from as far as 6 to 10 feet away. I never would have guessed it had that sort of range, and since have been able to target my wife where she can feel me scanning her from across the room from about 10 feet away. Since this happened, I have been trying to learn as much as I can about all related modalities or traditions that could shed some light on this phenomenon. I did not already have a model for this before it happened to me, so it's been a lot to catch up on, as I didn't already have any vocabulary for it. I wasn't already into Reiki, energy work, or related concepts. Even though my wife has a crystal store, I wasn't really into crystals myself beyond an aesthetic appreciation. I was always very dismissive of any metaphysical or New Age claims about them, for example. I don't have ambitions of being a healer on anything of the sorts. I don't think I would even want that responsibility. I have no grift attached to this, and it's quite literally turned my entire worldview upside down. If anything, it has been incredibly distracting, taking my focus away from many things that now feel very trivial compared to getting to the bottom of this. Ultimately, I would love if I could find a way to measure it in some way beyond my own sense of it, but also learn or understand if there is any purpose to it beyond knowing that I can simply feel the field of things. How does it feel for me? When I connect with something, I can basically feel how far out I feel the field and where its densest point is. I can almost push on the edge of that densest energy point like I'm pushing against a pillowy magnetic field. Can back my hand off just slightly and rest my hand on this field sometimes. Sometimes I also feel the rate/speed of vibration, also like the 9V battery to tongue sensation, but at different speeds/intensities. Washing hands will diminish it, but only as long as hands are wet. Also worth noting that I seem sensitive to electronics now a little too. Sometimes using my phone makes my hand tingle when scrolling, and I can generally feel where the battery or electric components of a device are in a similar way as finding energy buildups on a person. Anyway, if you're still here, I would greatly appreciate any resources, questions, idea for experiments or advice you have for me to cultivate, understand and explore this further. Stories number 12. Left my body and watched myself sleeping in real time. Out-of-body experience. I suffer from extreme debilitating insomnia, and last night my consciousness left my body and I literally stood watching myself in my bed. When I tried to wake up, I watched myself writhe and move, and when I tried to yell because I couldn't wake up, I watched as my mouth struggled to open and my face contorted in distress. It wasn't really scary at first, but more like fascinating. No, it was not a dream. I woke up eventually and did feel very freaked out, because the same night this happened our fire alarms went off 3 times for zero reason. I do think there is an entity tormenting me and trying to stop me from sleeping, but that is a story for another day. Also, no, I've never successfully astral projected before until now. Stories number 13. Something woke my entire family up. I have a small house and my room is right across from my parents' room. My mom, dad, and dog were all sleeping in their room while I was in mine playing a game. It happened at 1:10 a.m. and then there was just a long groaning noise coming from the hallway. The sound immediately brought chills to me and I started shaking, adrenaline rush I think, not coldness. It was pretty loud, so my dad sprung up thinking something was wrong with me. I heard it with my headphones on, so I quickly pulled them down and my dad opened my door asking if I was okay, but I thought something was wrong with my mom, but she was fine. My dad searched the rooms to see what could make that noise, but there was nothing. We all heard it in the hallway and have no idea what it could have been. It sounded human, so that's why we were all freaked out thinking something was wrong with each other. Stories number 14. Thanks Dad, I hope I got your message correct. So, I'll try not to make this too long. But I'm recently separated. I've been back into the dating scene pretty quickly. I've been seeing this girl a bit. We are just friends and taking it slowish. It does feel somewhat serious from my side at least. So, a few weeks ago we were supposed to meet for the first time, but she changed her mind and said she just wants to be friends. Since we are still talking but as friends. I took it pretty hard. I was quite upset at the time, as I felt heartbroken, and given I just come out of 10-year relationship it was probably too soon for me to be getting that deep with someone else. Anyway, as I said, we are still talking. My dad recently passed during my separation from the long-term relationship. I had to see my shrink at the time this new friend decided we were just friends. He said to me, "You don't want to be getting so deep with someone after what you've just been through," to which I agreed. I have taken it semi-seriously. Maybe not to the point I should, because last night I'm texting the new girl. My phone starts playing Lynyrd Skynyrd, Free Bird, randomly out of nowhere. The app on my iPhone it was coming from was no music app one have installed. It was just playing through a blank unlisted music player in iOS. Then it stopped. And my Messages app disappeared and reappeared. I'm fairly agnostic and a realist. I don't take paranormal things very seriously. I looked up the meaning of the song, something about being free as a man and not being tied down. My father was also from that 60s rock era. I do believe this was a message from him. To tell me to chill out with this new girl and don't get hurt. Be free. What do you guys think? I'm also an IT professional and understand iOS deeply. There's no way that song came on for any logical reason from a background app. I checked thoroughly. Edit, spelling, grammar, sentences, on mobile. Stories number 15. A couple of hours before my grandmother passed away, I was making a glass of tea, cutting up a lemon. I was whistling, nothing specific, just whistling. Then I heard in her room someone whistling the same tone and everything. I froze as I was trying to have some kind of explanation for it, but after a minute or two I just went back to doing what I was doing. This time I was whistling a different type of tune, just random whistles and stuff, and this time, the whistle was in the hallway closer to me and very loud. Same exact thing I was whistling again. My grandma has never been able to whistle a day in her life. And I know for a fact that she couldn't whistle on her deathbed with no teeth. I know I've heard the myth about whistling at night to never do it. But that night was insane for me. Not long after this happened, me and my fiancé went upstairs and found her passed away in her hospital bed. Stories number 16. Has anyone else experienced phantom grief? A sudden, unshakable feeling that someone has vanished. Question. I'm working on a script for a YouTube video and could use some help gathering stories and insights on something I'm calling phantom grief. This is a phenomenon where, seemingly out of nowhere, you feel an intense sense of loss, as though someone suddenly ceased to exist. It's not a typical feeling of sadness or missing someone, it's more like an unexplainable sense that they've vanished or never existed at all. This feeling can be brief, but it's unsettling. Imagine being with friends or family, and suddenly it feels like one person has been erased. You can read this to get an idea of what I'm talking about. To make this video as thorough as possible, I'd love to hear from anyone who's felt this before. Here are a few things I'm curious about. What did it feel like for you? How long did it last? Have you ever experienced it at the same time as someone else, like a shared feeling? Was the person you felt missing actually absent, or did they just feel distant or not there on some deeper level? Do you have any theories about what might cause this feeling? I'm also posting this in larger communities like for more input, but I'm also sharing it in and so the conversation can continue in those spaces, too. If you've experienced anything like this or have thoughts on what it could be, I'd really appreciate your input. Thanks in advance for any stories or insights you're willing to share. This is such a strange phenomenon, and I'm hoping we can uncover some common threads. Stories number 17. I am new to this group, I just joined but I wanted to share my experiences with a specific house. Haunted house. My boyfriend has a friend that is about 60 years old that owns a house that was built around the 1800s. The house is in the middle of nowhere, secluded from other homes for miles. It is the only house in the area surrounded by trees. And to add on to the uncomfortable environment, the house does not have a street light since it was built in the 1800s. My boyfriend was told by the lady that she would pay him to watch her house for 8 months. She was going to Mexico for the winter because she doesn't like winter very much, so she goes and stays with her friend. She said she would pay him double if he actually stayed in the house. He agreed because he didn't really have much money to begin with and he had already worked for her, so why not? And I was excited because the lady also made a point that I could stay too. And I really was eager to get out of my parents' house during the weekends. Those were the only times I could stay over. My boyfriend started staying the night before me. And he would always come over to my house and tell me he is going crazy at the lady's house because he feels dread and like he is unwelcome. And I, knowing my boyfriend, I thought this was one of his overreactions he does in certain situations he isn't familiar with, so I told him I'm pretty sure it is fine. But I was so wrong. The first weekend I stayed it was okay, I felt a bit off. But my boyfriend insisted we check the whole house top to bottom because he felt as though someone was in the house. I didn't think so, but I said okay. So, we started checking the house and we checked every room top to bottom, even the basement that was more like a dungeon. And there was nothing. So, I told him that there was nothing, let's go to bed. So, we went into the bedroom and he locked the door and put his knife under his pillow. I didn't ask why, and just went to bed. The next day we packed and went to town to get some groceries for during the week so he didn't have to pay for Wendy's for lunch during his shift. We made it back to the house and it was almost pitch black darkness. So, we went around to the back and opened the back door, stepped in the house, closed the door and walked a few inches away from the door, and the door knob started turning as if someone was turning it from the outside. But there was no one there. So, we bolted out of the house and we had gone to his parents' house to explain the situation. And his mom gave us silver necklaces. But yes, unfortunately we returned a few days later and this time it was worse. We had arrived when it was dark and my boyfriend quickly ran to the back and unlocked the door so he could open up the front sliding door. I had grabbed my stuff and realized I forgot my phone, so I walked back out the sliding door and it smelled like rotten eggs. And it wasn't the septic or anything rotten. My boyfriend even came to see what I was concerned about and smelled it. I retrieved my phone, went back inside and I went to the bathroom. And I heard something fall from in the kitchen. I ran out after I used the restroom and I asked my boyfriend what happened. He said things started falling off the wall in the kitchen. The lady had a few bird sculptures on the wall and a couple broke. We fixed them, but it was unfortunate. We then slept in the truck after that. Next week we came back to the house, and it was 85 degrees in the house, when usually we'd have to wear coats, because the lady likes it somewhat cold, and it also saves electricity. We for sure know we didn't do it, and the lady's other friend hadn't been to the house that week, and also she would never touch the thermostat ever, so we were confused. Then we found that all of the doors were closed. It's not odd for the doors being closed per se, because the lady liked the doors closed, but, except one during the winter, the laundry and pantry room, because her pipes would freeze if we didn't keep the door open. But it was closed and no one had been there. And we didn't close it. The next day my boyfriend was changing his oil and I had to use the restroom. The doorknob started turning and I thought it was my boyfriend, but no, he was outside. Then when I opened the door, the basement started creaking open. Yes, the basement does have wind drafts. But hear me out, the whole house except for kitchen has thick carpet, so it would be impossible for the door to creep open against the carpet with small airflow. The following week we felt as if we were more in danger than previously. We got so uncomfortable that we had to stop going there. And my boyfriend the previous weeks had already stopped staying there alone after the first incident of the door knob turning. It was nearly impossible to stay there even when we constantly came back, but we wanted to watch her house, and it wasn't just for money but for the lady. But we actually heard that the lady had an experience where she woke up for work early in the morning. It was dark, she went out to start her car. She was in her car when she heard something knocking on her car window. She went out and looked, but found no one. May I remind you, her house is in the middle of nowhere, miles away from other homes. So why and how would anyone be knocking on her car window in pitch darkness in the very early morning? She doesn't believe in paranormal but has had experiences. I know this text is rushed, but I just wanted to share from my memories of experiences at the most haunted house I have ever stayed at, ever. Stories number 18. Favorite aunt is always evil in my dreams. Wanted to hear y'all's take on this. I am setting up an altar to honor my friends and relatives that have passed away, but am conflicted on adding my favorite aunt's photo. I loved her dearly and have a million fond memories with her. But since her passing I have never had a positive dream about her. In fact, the dreams I have that include her truly throw me off for days at a time because the feelings that come up in the dreams are terrifying. They are always based in my dad's garage or the hallway in his house that I know is haunted. I don't understand any of it because she always cared about me. We laughed and took spontaneous trips. I can't think of any bad memories of her at all. But it's been around 20 years since her passing and I've only had 4 dreams with her and they have all had this awful vibe. I guess the question is, should her picture be included even though I get nervous when thinking of her now? And why is this happening in the first place? Stories number 19. I received a sign was visited by my mum's spirit the moment her car left the road. I work from home and it was a usual Monday. I was struggling to concentrate and getting easily distracted throughout the house. Around midday, I was in my bedroom upstairs with my 2 dogs, stroking their heads and generally wasting time. All of a sudden there's a huge bang from another room. The dogs looked scared and didn't seem to want to investigate until I went first. I looked in each room until I found that my standard-sized baseball bat, which I leave leant up in a corner handle end up, with the top of the bat wedged in place against a slightly raised floorboard, had fallen onto the wooden floor. I instantly felt scared. It had never fallen before, and hasn't fallen since. I messaged my partner, who lives with me, to ask if he had moved the bat or perhaps kicked it slightly before he left for work, putting it off balance maybe. Assuming he'd say, maybe, I don't recall, he replied categorically with, no, I definitely didn't. Why? I explained what happened and he replied back that he was spooked, which is very unlike him as he is a skeptic. I decided to walk downstairs and try to shake the scared feeling off, but I became acutely aware of that the house was stone cold and there was dead silence, no sound of passing cars, no wind sound past the windows or birds chirping. A feeling of intense fear consumed me, so I just went to sit at my desk and tried to block it out. One of my dogs sat on my lap and one sat at my feet, but something told me to swivel round in my chair and look, at what I don't know, but the dog at my feet turned too and her ears were twitching and her nose sniffing like crazy. The dog on my lap also looked. We were all staring in the same direction, at the doorway into the hall. This moment passed after what was probably a few seconds, and it was suddenly like normal sound returned and the temperature rose. I did however notice for the rest of the day that I had an overwhelming feeling of sadness and depression for no reason that I had to keep shutting out. I thought nothing of it all though, and got on with my day, just putting it down to a spooky blip, with no real meaning. Cut to 4 p.m., I receive a phone call from my sister saying Mum's partner had called her, stating Mum hadn't returned home from the supermarket and when he tried to call her, it kept going straight to voicemail, and he was worried. I tell her to call accident and emergency to ask if any unidentified females had been admitted and I called the police to file a missing persons report. In the meantime, my partner has come home, and we head out to search for my mum, at the supermarket and on her driving route home. During our search, I receive a call around 7 p.m. from the police who informed me of the last time she was seen in her car on CCTV, at 12:17 p.m. I hung up the call and checked my messages to my partner. I found that I told him about the baseball bat falling over at 12:18 p.m. I was a bit spooked, but didn't think it was hugely significant at this point, but when I told my partner he said a chill went over his whole body. Knowing where she had last been seen, we then focused our search on the river that ran alongside her driving route, and, lo and behold, we found her car upside down in the river. The emergency services arrived quickly and recovered her body. The police told me this week the exact location of the last CCTV camera she was seen on. I checked Google Maps and found it was 1 minute away from her crash location. She would have left the road and ultimately crashed at 12:18, the time the baseball bat fell over and caused the huge bang. The evidence is pointing towards my mum passing out at the wheel, but her cause of death has been found to be drowning. I have questions. Firstly, the baseball bat, it fell at the point of her passing out/leaving the road, then, the house going cold and silent was likely at the point she had passed away. What does this all mean? How did her passing out/the crash cause the baseball bat to fall? Is it the energy that is released when she passed / or had her spirit left her body at the point of no return? Any views takes on all this would be appreciated. TDLR, at the exact time of my mum's road traffic accident, a stable baseball bat wedged into a corner, fell and clattered onto a wooden floor. Then the house went cold and silent and I felt scared. I didn't know of her passing until 8 hours later when I found her car upside down in the river. Stories number 20. Does an entity get stronger when it knows you've noticed it? I had always been skeptical about paranormal stuff, but this question was prompted by an unsettling incident last night. I was lying in bed, not really able to sleep. My eyes had adjusted to the dark, so could make out my wardrobe, the pattern on the curtains, etc. When out of nowhere, a dark-colored shadow/cloud type thing appeared at the side of my bed, for only a couple of seconds, moving steadily to the left and then disappearing. For a bit of background, there were a good few weird incidents over the years. About a decade ago, my younger cousin, about 4 at the time, had been playing in what is now my room. When out of nowhere, upon opening the door into the hallway, she stopped in her tracks and started crying/shouting for her mum, looking absolutely terrified. She was fine once her mum came and got her, and I don't think she ever told us what she saw, and would be too old to remember now. My mother went to the psychic center a few years later, where a medium does readings while people wait to see the psychic. Just before my mother's reading, the medium stopped on her and told her that, there's a negative entity in the hall, and the child has seen it. Then she was called to the psychic and had to go, leaving her with no more information. I've always been very skeptical of psychics and the like, but the overlap is weird. There's been other occurrences, ranging from unsettling to explainable, but this post is already too long. I've felt the weird presence in the hall more strongly in the past few weeks, and have now seen something in my room. So, back to the question, has me sensing a presence/giving mental attention to it made it stronger/allowed it to appear? And is there a way to know if an entity is definitely negative, as the medium claimed? Stories number 21. I don't know how to explain this. Today I was on my way to work and slowed down for railroad tracks. I usually don't slow down, but something told me to. After I cross them, I see something approaching in my peripheral vision, so I slow down thinking it's an idiot. A truck flies out in front of me and hits some above-ground gas line protection, really tough steel cage, and backs up and drives off with no damage. There were really old-looking dents and scratches from a vehicle. They eventually turn down a side street and disappear. I know they did not turn somewhere as I saw the truck turn down the street and never saw it again. If I had never slowed down at the tracks, the truck would have T-boned me, but it might not have, suggesting I saw it dissipate. What I saw when the truck turned down the side street, the truck went in front of a telephone pole and became invisible after the telephone pole. TLDR, a truck crashed in front of me and dissipated after going down a side street. Stories number 22. Paranormal or mental health. Trigger warning: content around psychosis and schizophrenia. So I am someone who has always been around paranormal stuff and has always been really drawn to the paranormal. I love it and I'm fascinated by it. When I say I've always been around paranormal stuff, a close family member is a medium and I've experienced a lot of things that may be deemed paranormal. Having said this, one question that has always burned in my mind is, how can we ever know if somebody is hearing disembodied voices of those who have passed, or even demons, or if they are experiencing a psychotic episode or suffering with schizophrenia? For a long time, I worked in a psychiatric hospital, and the number of patients diagnosed with psychosis and schizophrenia I encountered who said they could see and hear demons and people who have died was vast. There was always part of me that was like, what if these people are spiritually just on a higher plane than most of us? What if what they are experiencing is not a figment of their imagination? How the hell do you go about proving this? I see lots of posts on this page from people claiming they hear demonic voices and such. And due to my background in psychiatric work, my rational mind often jumps straight to schizophrenia. a cute psychotic episode, but then I think to myself, how do I know this? How could anybody possibly truly know what is a figment of their imagination and what is not? What are people's views on this? Stories number 23. Restaurant Ghost. So, I work at a restaurant and our restaurant has a downstairs and an upstairs. On days that aren't busy, we don't use upstairs, but on our busy days we use the upstairs, which is a bar and seating area, as well as the downstairs. Anyway, when upstairs isn't being used it's completely dark and no one is up there. Last week, I went to go use the upstairs bathroom and when I was washing my hands I heard someone whistling while walking towards the bathroom door. I thought this was weird because you would hear someone come out of the elevator because when you step out of it, it makes this loud beeping noise. I most definitely didn't hear the elevator. The elevator is the only way upstairs and no one takes the stairs, ever. The elevator is also right around the corner from the bathroom, anyway. The whistling was getting closer and closer so I was expecting someone to come into the bathroom but when I opened the door, no one was there. I looked through the whole upstairs and absolutely no one was up there with me. I know I heard whistling and footsteps because the floors are squeaky and that's exactly what I was hearing. It kind of freaked me out so I just ran back downstairs. I immediately told my manager because I was so freaked out and she told it's a normal occurrence. She told me that they named the ghost Sarah, and that Sarah likes fucking with people. She likes pulling people's hair, touching them, turning sinks on, etc. My manager also told me her experiences as well. We fuck with Sarah though, she's chill. TLDR, I heard whistling and footsteps coming towards the bathroom. When I opened the door no one was there. I searched the whole upstairs, no one there. I told my manager and she said it's a normal occurrence and that her and my coworkers named the ghost Sarah. Stories number 24. My mattress was shoved while alone on the bed. Hi all, feeling out of sorts right now. While waiting for my husband to get home from work, I had a sudden bout of fatigue. It was very odd, but I do get fatigued sometimes. I laid down for 2 hours, still as a mouse, on my bed. I was alone in my duplex and the sun had set. I realized I was alone in complete darkness, minus my phone light as I was scrolling mindlessly. I didn't think much of it. Suddenly, something shoved my mattress roughly and my body shook on the bed. This was not an earthquake, as it was only the mattress that felt shoved. I was laying up against my sturdy headboard. I jumped up and ran out. My front door was unlocked and I thought there was a possible break-in. I felt someone there. My door is never unlocked, so this was some kind of sick coincidence, I guess. There were police officers nearby and they came to check on my place in minutes. No one there according to them, and they half serious, half jokingly said to call a priest. I apologized and thanked them for checking everything out. I feel like a crazy person. Anyone have similar to being shoved? Stories number 25. The giant man stalking us during the Christmas week. I have shared this story again from a throwaway and from 2 banned accounts. They had gotten pretty famous so I say this from now if you think the story seems familiar. When I was maybe 8 years old, my wee brother and my parents went to our village house for Christmas vacation. And before we start, I should try give a small layout of the house and area. The house is located up in the mountains and it's part of a small village of maybe 50 residents. Every house is pretty far away from one another since they are being separated either by forest or olive trees. The house is shaped like the letter L. At the top of the letter is the only bedroom which had 2 beds and a double bed. At the low part where the 2 lines connect is the only door and living room kitchens, and at the other top after a small hallway is the bathroom. The walls are very thick, a meter, and the place is ancient. Now to the story. I could never go to sleep from a very young age. I would be tossing and turning till the dawn since my earliest memories. Day 1, I have nothing to do in the night other than play out the day in my head or find any activity in silence to no disturb the others sleeping in the same room. Usually after trying to sleep for an hour or two I would hear the window above my head circling from the cold. I would just stand up on the bed and look at the snowy biome and make scenarios in front of my eyes, childish fantasies. I am already standing for ABT an hour when I notice it. Looked like a guy, but I couldn't be sure. He was maybe 300 feet away next to a tree. He couldn't be a person though. He was as tall as the olive tree, roughly at 8 foot, and he didn't have human proportions. And for the 90 minutes that I was standing he didn't move an inch. First thing in the morning I tell my father what I saw, and he told me that it's most likely just the cloths we tie off trees to separate where our land ends. Well, it was far away and dark enough it could easily be a trick of the eye, but I insisted and he agreed to take me where I claim I saw this guy. When we reached there was nothing, and my father proclaimed that there must have been a trick of the eye cause there are no markings anywhere in the snow. Day 2, the day was nothing out of the ordinary. Played around. Was with my father when he cut some wood for the fireplace and had some family time in the afternoon since there is no signal in the area to download some movie on the family laptop. At night the exact same thing, trying to sleep, but I got up by the creaking sound of the window. I get up very happy since I was already daydreaming what to play around with, but when I stood up I froze. There he was. My eyes picked him in fractions of a second. ABT 100 feet away he was standing partially behind a tree, his arms were stretching far too low. His back was hunched and he was but naked in freezing temperatures surrounded by snow. I decided to have a staring competition with him for a good 10 minutes before coming to the realization that I must wake my parents up from behind me. And I don't want to brag, but I will. I was very smart as a kid, and in my head I had the irrational fear that this wasn't a human, so I shouldn't treat it as one. I kept my eyes on it and yelled for my parents to wake up. After some convincing my dad got up and stood on my bed to stare. The second this happened I almost fell due to the weight shift of the mattress, and I looked down, looked back out, and there was nothing. It had completely vanished and I got in panic mode. I knew what I had seen, and even if my father was dismissive my mother disclaimed the fact that I wouldn't wake them unless the house was on fire. I couldn't sleep that night. I slept after lunch the next day and got waken up by visitors at around 11 at night. It's Christmas Day. Day 3. I had nothing to do with 4 old relatives I had never seen again in my life, so y'all can guess what I did, and no, I wasn't playing with my 6-year brother. I was staring outside of the window. Absolutely nothing. An hour goes by and nothing. I was trying to find him in the picture. Closing on 90 minutes I start getting disappointed and I couldn't stand up anymore, and I see him. He was walking, parallel to the house ABT 100 feet away. He came out of the denser forest. I observe him for no more than 15 seconds that felt like ages. And he does a shift 90 degrees turn and he is heading directly at the house. I get off the bed and yell immediately. There he is coming towards us. No ever said another word, and they jumped off their chairs and rushed outside. My father grabbed the rifle also and rushed outside. No one even grabbed a coat. I was standing at the door, and after some time I show them where I saw him exactly. Again, not even marks on the snow. Instead of dismissing me this time no one said a word, and my mother even instructed me to try and sleep. I was given a tea she made and minutes later I was asleep. Day 4. Woke up very late and felt groggy. I didn't want to do much in the day, but after dinner my mother gave me another tea and soon I was asleep. I woke up due to the creaking sound made by the window. I stand up and face stuck to the window. It was him, eyes black and tiny like petals, mouth too wide like it's painted on, eyes way too far apart, head way too big to be human. He was bald with some facial hair, all white like the snow. I fall back on my bed crying from the shock, and they both wake up immediately. They try to cool me down and my mother went to make another tea. They wait for me to drink it and lay on my bed and they go to sleep. 10 minutes pass by and I can't sleep cause I want to pee. I was too afraid to even move from under the sheets, but I thought to myself that I can't pee here, so I must get up sooner or later. I get up and I go to the hallway and hunch down to reach something, the doorknob. The door is made mostly of glass and you can see very clearly into the small space before the bathroom. but the doorknob is about 1 foot off the ground for some reason. I open the door and my head hits something and I fall back. He was inside the small hall. His shoulders were touching the ceiling and he had the same frozen face. I couldn't even make a sound, so I crawled out as fast as I could and fell on my brother's bedside cabinet, and this woke everyone up. I looked back and he was again vanished. Then I got to the crying part like every kid would. I was hugged and was told that everything is okay, and they waited for me to sleep this time. Woken up early and my parents said that we will celebrate the New Year's Day in back at home. I felt relieved, but getting up I found something on the foot of my bed, a small makeshift like doll made out of rope. I kept this till I was 14 to 15, which got lost after I changed rooms to get a bigger bed. My mother most likely found it and threw it away. The story would end here normally, but since I last posted this maybe 4 years ago, I have learned something new. At some point my mother had come in the room during a family gathering where all my cousins were and I was telling them about paranormal stories I have from my life. I said 5 of them that night and Jay will post all of them soon. I closed with this one I say here, and my mother sat and hear it. Finishing what I had to say, she very casually said that my grandfather had seen the same at the same age as me, so did his father. The parameters were always the same. The house is in the middle of nowhere and it must be snowing. The kid who sees is under the age of 10 and some found some toy the morning after. She had given me valerian tea cause she knew how these stories ended and wanted me to not experience this. And another thing I heard from my last post is, yes, the story sounds like the Yule Man, but I had first written it online at age 13 before he was ever a thing. This thing just saying a running legend of the area my village is, and it said that he is a bad omen and an evil spirit, and one kid sees it each year in the 4 to 5 villages around. He has been seen for centuries. And my village has been the center of many events that I will share if y'all want. Stories number 26. My grandfather who passed away came into my dream and wished me best of luck. I had this in my chest for a while and I want to tell this to somebody cause I don't know what this means. So, this was my dream, 2024 May. I would love to know your thoughts as well. Me and my mom were at the house and my brother was playing video games. And my mom was cooking and preparing food for our grandpa who came to visit us. And I was helping her. Then I let her and grandpa to have a talk and went to my brother's room to see what he was playing. And then, my mom called both of us from the living area to go with grandpa to his bus stop because he is now ready to leave the house. To accompany him because he was old and it was late night. So we get out from the house with grandpa and went to the bus stop which was near to our house. My grandpa told us to leave him there and he can manage himself because it's getting really dark and the bus stop was built near to a cemetery, so it's not safe. A young lady, me, to be there alone although I have my brother with me. As he told us to leave, we both decided to leave, and before we go, I said to my grandpa that I wish him to be safe and I blessed him. My brother didn't spoke a single word with him. I was kind of feeling sad about being that old and coming to visit us all alone. So the words came from my heart. And as a reply, he told me to not to worry about anything, be safe and always know who is with you, don't trust people easily, and do not take a step back cause there is always somebody there to protect me. He blessed me always with his heart. And we said goodbye. Then me and my brother turned to go home, and that was the time I kind of realized that my grandpa was already being dead. And I got chills on my legs and felt my legs getting weak. And I looked back as I couldn't walk and my grandpa was not there anymore. Context: he had been dead for 14 years and I was 7 years old when he passed away. As he couldn't speak for over 2 years because he was battling with brain problems before he passed away. He only mumbled some words when we go to visit him. So I never got a time to have a real talk with him in real life. And I never saw him on my dreams because he was the last person to be on a dream because I didn't got a chance to make a connection with him.